there is the illustration of the idea that in Gnosticism the kingdom is already here and now, and it is to signal a shift of your consciousness. The apocalypse must take place within you, and so that is the Gnostic translation of these materials. Now, opposed to the Mark Gospel, we have the latest of the four Gospels, the last one of this group of four written, the Gospel of John, which is written about 100 A.D. And the Gospel of John is the least apocalyptic of all four of the Gospels. There is not a word of the coming of the kingdom in the John Gospel. There are no apocalyptic passages in it whatsoever. It is, in fact, the first Gnostic text, and many of the Gnostics drew great inspiration from the John Gospel. You have in the opening of the John Gospel, the infancy narratives of Luke and Matthew are simply done away with as irrelevant. And you have the idea of, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was made flesh and came down and dwelt amongst us. So you have the idea of Christ as an avatar, very much in the way in which Krishna and the Buddha were later regarded as avatars of Vishnu. And so you have this idea of Christ as an avatar. It's an almost heretical idea. And initially the John Gospel was not accepted by the church. It took a while for it to be so, primarily because so many of the heretical cults drew their inspiration from it. So we have the idea that the Christ did not really suffer on the cross, but was only a docetic, mysterious manifestation of a God in the John Gospel. Furthermore, we have this strange and mysterious passage instead of the Apocalypse, where Christ promises the coming of the Paraclete, the third one who will come. He says, "Behold, for if I don't go away, then the third one won't come. The Paraclete, the Advocate, the Comforter, he will come down and give to you fresh revelations." And and so many of the prophets that came afterward proclaimed themselves manifestations of the Paraclete, the new teachers. In the book of Revelation, then, we have a document that may or may not have been written by the same man who wrote the Gospel of John and the Johannine epistles. If so, we have perhaps a contradiction, because the Christ of the John Gospel and the Johannine epistles is a God of love, and love is the overriding theological import of those works. Whereas in the Apocalypse, we don't have at all a God of love, but a God of hatred. We have the God of the Apocalypse who will come and wipe the earth clean. He will smash the dead bodies and trample on them like grapes in a wine press, you know. We have these wonderful loving images of, that John writes the 7 letters to the churches, and some of them, if they don't get their act together, then he'll send the horrible lamb with 7 horns and 7 eyes to come and eat all their books. The Apocalypse, the book of Revelation, is based largely on Jewish apocalypses and Jewish apocalyptic material, and you can see seams in the text where the editor of this text has not quite thoroughly ironed out the Jewish passages. There are a few of them in there, but it is certainly the most grandiose and macabre and disturbing of all the apocalyptic works from this period. So that's the Revelation of John. Now, the apocalyptic period begins to die down in about the year 150 or so, right in the middle of the 2nd century. And there was one last group of apocalyptists named the Montanists, after their prophet Montanus. And Montanus proclaimed himself the manifestation of the Paraclete that had been predicted who would come in the John Gospel. And he and his two women would go into these ecstatic trances, and they would utter visions of the end of the world and the archangel Michael fighting the dragon and the descent of the dragon into hell. And they drew great inspiration from both the John Gospel and the book of Revelation. Needless to say, they were condemned by the church, and many of the bishops tried to perform exorcisms on them. These didn't work. And so the Montanists fled up north to an area, to a village in Asia Minor, where they expected the New Jerusalem to descend down out of the clouds like a UFO and land in a field there. Well, that never happened. And the fate of the Montanists later on, under Justinian, who persecuted them, was that they locked themselves up in a big church and lit themselves on fire in a mass suicide. So not much has changed in the world, it would seem. So that is the end of the apocalyptic period. Now, in the 3rd century AD, we have the great Gnostic movement known as Manichaeanism. And Manichaeanism is really the culmination of the whole Gnostic period. Mani was a prophet, a Persian prophet who lived in Babylon. And he consciously tried, he was a consummate theologian, and he also saw himself as a manifestation of the Paraclete. But Mani really had something to say. And what he wanted to do was to synthesize ideas from every one of the known religions of his time period into one vast universal church that did indeed prove to be a big competitor with the Christian church for a while. Mani was, there are influences from Buddhism. Mani was said to have traveled to India, possibly in the footsteps of the apostle of Thomas. And he started out, his father was a Mandean, and he himself started out as an Elkasite. And he saw Zoroaster and the Buddha and Christ as prophets leading up to his revelation. He saw himself as the fourth, and the one true Paraclete whose revelations were the culmination of all of these traditions. And so I want to say a couple of words about the Manichaean cosmology and its vision of the end of the world. Now, the Manichaeans envision the world like very much like the Zoroastrians as a conflict between two principles, light and darkness, and three phases of history. In the first phase, we have the separation of the powers of light and darkness. In the middle stage, we have their intermingling, and in the final stage, their separation with the victory of light over darkness. So it's very similar to the Zoroastrian conception. In the beginning, there was the Lord of Light living in his kingdom of light. And the Lord of Darkness at one point looked up and saw it and decided he wanted to attack it. So he mounted up his armies and proceeded to get ready to attack it. But the Lord of Light perceived what was going to happen, and so he drew forth his consort, Sophia, and she in turn brought into being the Anthropos, the primal man, the sun. And he suits himself up like the Archangel Michael going out for battle, but he suits himself up in an armor of light that is said to have 5 components to it. And he descends down into the realm of darkness to try to forestall this attack, and he fails. And the demons rip off his armor of light and they devour it. So all the forces of darkness, which are here associated with matter in the material world and with evil, everything that is material is evil in Manichaeanism, have swallowed up the particles of light. So light is imprisoned in the darkness. So the primordial man has to be rescued, and he is brought back up by the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit then begins to proceed to create the cosmos. The Holy Spirit, in the form of a demiurge, begins hammering out the cosmos. And he does so using the dead bodies of demons that were killed apparently in the battle. And some of them have swallowed particles of light. So the universe is created out of a combination of particles of light and darkness. The darkness has swallowed up the light. So he creates the constellations, the sun, the moon, the stars, the earth. And then at one point he sails forth in his moon boat down into the world of darkness, where the demons look up at him, and the male demons see him as a beautiful woman. And they ejaculate, and their ejaculation falls The seed falls into the earth.